We'll get started just a few minutes after 7. Give people a chance to join. All right, we've got quite a crowd, so I'll just slowly start talking. Sky will be watching the chat, and I will be too. So if you have any questions, please ask them there. This presentation is on Forbidden Peak, which is the image you see before. This was taken by me or my climbing partner, Jordan, on the day of the climb. The peak is kind of, oh, I have a pointer. All right, is kind of right here. And the east ridge starts around right here, and you climb the towers there. Jordan may or may not join the call, and he'll speak up if I'm lying about anything, because stories grow. All right, we have a lot of people on the call, so just, I think everyone is muted, but mute your microphone and turn off the video. It can start lagging if there's 100 people with video on. And then just feel free to ask questions in the chat feature. I'll try to answer any questions that go in as I present. And before I get too started, I hope in this weird time that this program helps bring a little light into your life. The Mountaineers is a nonprofit, started in 1906. Its efforts bring around publishing books. They have instruction, which is how I got into the Mountaineers, all volunteer led, and also help with keeping areas open. And like I've personally benefited from the toilets they've built at the climbing area in Vantage. So I know it's a hard time for everyone, but we need to continue trying to keep our outdoor areas accessible. So if you have anything to give, I invite you to. And with that, I'm going to start the show. So just as a heads up, I estimate this will probably be about 40 minutes, and then I'll leave time for Q&A at the end, and I'll answer questions as we go. I'm first going to go over what Mount Forbidden is, where it is, the routes on it, what I did to plan for the route, and then my experience on it. If anyone goes to climb it in the future, below is my info, and I'm happy to share information and talk about it in the future. So about the peak, Mount Forbidden was climbed 80 years ago in 1940 by Fred and Hemley Becky, Jim Crooks, Lloyd Anderson, and Dave Lind. It was first by the West Ridge, which is the red line you see down here. And so that's the West Ridge. The route I'm talking about is the East Ridge, so the one over here. And the West Ridge is one of the 50 classics. So a while ago, a book got published of the 50 classic climbs in America. And it made a lot of the routes become more popular, probably like the West Ridge of Forbidden. And then some still haven't been repeated and likely never will just because of changing conditions. This is Fred Becky right here in 2012. He recently passed away, and there was a movie about him. Definitely a fun watch if you have any time, which I'm sure we all do right now. And it's called Dirtbag. And so then about this route, the East Ridge, and I'll often be saying that, but when I say the East Ridge, I'm really talking about this route, which is called the East Ridge Direct. The East Ridge of Forbidden route is technically a little bit on the other side, and I'll point it out as we go through pictures. But the East Ridge Direct is climbing the East Ridge of Forbidden. And the first ascent was in 1958. Again, Fred Becky was one of the party members. If you're going around anywhere in practically the United States and you look at first ascents of peaks, you'll see his name on quite a few of them. So the route is Alpine Grade 3, which means it takes the majority of a day to climb, and it's quite committing. Once you're on the route, it often is easier to climb the route and descend once you've finished it than to bail while you're going up it. The Becky Bibles say that it's 5'7" to 5'9". Mountain Project and other books put it at 5'8". And a lot of this depends on how well you follow the route, and but the main crux, which is hard to miss, is 5'8". The route itself starts at 8,300 feet, and the summit is only around 8,860 feet. So it's only 500 to 600 feet of climbing. But the car is at 3,200 feet. So to get to the base where you even start climbing, you have to hike 5,000 feet up. And I'll go into strategies on accomplishing that later. But anything before you take this information of this show, whether you're just to enjoy it or hoping to climb the route one day, be always prepared that conditions change and be ready for anything. The left is Forbidden Peak in 1960. As you can see, the glacier has receded quite a bit. There's routes, and I'm sure people know more than me, but there's routes actually on this south face of Forbidden. And I'm just curious how much harder they are to get to with how much more scraped rock is exposed. But when I saw these pictures, I had to put it in. As a heads up, this slideshow will be on the Mountaineers RSVP page, and in the speaker notes, I have links to a lot of the different pages. This is from Receding Glaciers article that Steph Abeg helped write, and so I have the link to that in here, and you can see a lot of other receding glaciers in the Pacific Northwest. So where you park is at the Cascade Trailhead, or the real route starts around here, and there's about enough room for 3 cars. So if you miss it, you're gonna have to just hike a little, maybe a 4th mile extra to get down. But this trailhead's at 3,200 feet. This dot is where a lot of people do spend a night if they have permits. It is in the North Cascades National Park, so you have to get permits if you plan on spending a night. And then here's Forbidden Peak. The East Ridge is actually the Southeast Ridge. It just got the name East Ridge. The West Ridge is pretty true. And then this is the North Ridge, which is another really good route in Forbidden. I haven't done it, it's just done it. Everyone I've talked to who's done it has only said good things. But it's not often done because after hiking over here, you come up and then you actually do a rappel, I believe, and then cross the glacier to get on it way over here. So this is the closest trailhead to over here, and it's quite a commitment. If you're just a hiker, the hike up Cascade Pass, which this is the trail right here, this is a beautiful area. Sahali is also a really fun peak to do. So I'm gonna go into topos. I think they're a great way to see the mountain, and especially understand as I'm going ahead when we're talking about elevation, what it means. So the interesting thing about Cascade Pass, which is this whole area, well, this is the pass right here. This is Boston Basin. Peaks like El Dorado are over here, so you park down the road over here. But Boston Basin is extremely beautiful, and you kind of have this alpine tundra, and then you get alpine environments with glaciers, and Forbidden, I had it mentioned on a previous page, it's called a glacial horn, which means it's a very steep peak with aspects, with every aspect has been corroded away by glaciers over time. Probably the most famous glacier horn that people can think of is the Matterhorn in Europe, but glacier horns tend to be very steep mountains that don't have a hiking route, just because of how rocky and steep they are. Boston Basin is a fantastic place to camp. I'll have photos later and you could see for yourself why. And like typical North Cascades, there's a lot of rainfall that comes through here. So down here around 3,000 feet, it very rarely gets, if it does snow, it gets rained on and disappears pretty quickly. And you kind of get that northwest temperate rainforest down here. So you kind of go through about 3 climate zones when you climb in this area. You start in kind of a temperate rainforest, go into alpine tundra, and then a true alpine environment. Then these are the routes of the peak itself, and I'll explain them. So the yellow is kind of the approach route, just for, we're right here, so where this dot ends is this dot for perspective. The yellow route is the approach to the East Ridge. And you kind of start at a notch here. I'll have photos of exactly where we end up. And then the green is the ascent of the East Ridge direct. The red is, and so then I kind of drew out 3 descents, and Forbidden doesn't have a non-technical descent, and probably one of the hardest things of climbing the peak is how you're gonna get off of it. The red line is the East Ledges descent, which me and Jordan decided to do. And I'll go into more detail later, but essentially this is 5 rappels, and then you traverse directly, and then there's a gully and you just climb up it and you end where you drop your packs, which is why we opted to do it. Another descent, which Jim Nelson recommended and we were planning to do, but unfortunately couldn't because of weather, is you climb down this top part of the North Ridge, and then at a sandy ledge, you traverse over onto the East Ridge. Because we didn't do it, I can't tell you exactly where that sandy ledge is, but I have photos and I'm gonna try to point out where it is. Then another descent that you could do is the West Ridge. Most people who climb the West Ridge for ascending then end on the West Ridge and go back down it. One of the reasons why we didn't do this, because we did want to kind of experience the West Ridge, is the Cat Scratch Gully, which you rappel down here. The trip reports of it were sounding really bad, and we didn't think it was a safe option at the time we did it in August. So we ended up doing, we were hoping to do the North Ridge descent, but ended up with the East Ledges. just rappelling straight, this blue line would connect with these ledges. And the real benefit here is you end up where you started, so you can drop off packs of non-climbing gear and know that you can recover them. And if questions come in, I'm happy to talk on these more. But I would say with Forbidden, just know your descent and your options beforehand. I highly recommend, Jim Nelson was a really good resource. He has written Selected Climb of the Cascades, and in his first book, he has route descriptions of this. In his gear shop in Seattle, I swung by there and was able to talk to him and get, he showed me pictures and walked me through things. And so I highly recommend picking his brain for beta. So now that we kind of have an overview of what the mountain is, I'm going to talk about how to plan the trip. And so this is me, and this is Mount Forbidden on the day we did it. Notice it looks pretty good. We had 1% chance of rain that day. A little bit of foreshadowing right there. So this is Boston Basin right here. And we'll see more photos of it later. We're just getting above tree line. And it's honestly one of the most pretty areas I've spent time in. Oh yeah, so Jordan just commented, nice rope coil. The whole time we were going up, we got stuck in some slide alder and my rope coil got messed up. And so Jordan was teasing me and telling me to fix it. And so I stubbornly never did. But the three things I think that I would think about when planning this trip is to do a day or overnight trip. And this would kind of answer the next question of whether you're going to pitch it out or simul climb the route. And I'll go into what that means later. Jordan just said it was like that from the car. I would also spend a lot of time reading the beta of the different descents and knowing which one you plan on doing. Forbidden doesn't have a good spot to be stuck up there, and if you do need to be rescued, it would not be an easy mountain to be rescued off for many involved. So I'll kind of go through them in order. This photo is from the North Ridge of Forbidden. It's not mine, it's Paul Pottinger's, but I liked the aspect. This is Forbidden in the North Ridge. You can kind of see here there's a kind of a gendarme that is part of the East Ridge, which then goes out of sight. But the thing about thinking about a day versus overnight is the nice thing about a day is you do it in a day. So me and Jordan took a Friday off and we went up to go do it, and no one else was on the route, and we got to experience Forbidden on our own, which in this day and age is a pretty rare experience. But the negative is that there is 5.6 thousand feet of elevation in one day, which is not easy even if you are in great shape. You will definitely need to simul climb the route unless you don't want to sleep for 24 hours straight. And then the other thing is if you get benighted, which would be stuck on route, you don't have sleeping gear like you would here. And Jordan says we were not in good shape, which maybe we weren't. And then the other thing too for kind of the weekend warriors like me is doing it in a day lets you do it in one day midweek like we did. I guess Friday is kind of towards the end, but lets you do it when less people are going to be on the route. Doing it overnight, pitching it out becomes more viable. I don't know if this is a route you'd really want to pitch out. A lot of people on it will be simul climbing, and so you will get bothered by people trying to pass you. But the benefits is Boston Basin is extremely beautiful. Again, you do need to get permits, but they're not as hard as some other places to get permits. And it lets you do the approach in one day, so you can do the bulk of the elevation gain and sleep it off and then do the route separately on a different day. So those are kind of the pros and cons. We opted for a day, and I think that was the great way to do it. As Jordan likes to say, there's a restaurant in the town Marble Mount, and we were 24 hours from Mondo to Mondo, so we got to experience Mondo twice in about a 24-hour period. And that really pushed us to go faster, is knowing that there was greasy burgers made in a Chinese restaurant waiting for us. So how to pitch it out. I know we have a lot of people on the call, and so this might, but just so that way some people who don't understand know it. So pitching it out is what you normally see climbers do. It's kind of an inchworm, and I cut a rubber band, but one person goes up and brings up the rope, and then they belay up the second person, and then that person will lead from there. Whereas simul climbing is where, like in this image, both people are climbing at the same time. But the big hazard here is that if one person falls, it makes both of them fall. And with the amount of slack of the rope that will be in the system, it is a situation where you only do it if you know you won't fall. But you're wearing the rope for safety. And so when simuling, you'd still pitch out the 5/8 crux. I'll say forbidden is not the place to learn how to do it, even though there are pretty easy sections of simul climbing. And even if you do need to pitch out anything 5/6 or above, which is a rating of how people rate climbing routes for difficulty, a lot of the route is still low 5th class, so you could still get quite a bit of it simul climbing. And so the real benefit with simul climbing is you just go a lot faster because you're hardly stopping. Whereas if you're pitching it out, every time a person reaches the end of the rope, they have to build an anchor, and then the next person climbs. And so rather than both people covering ground at once, you're only having one person cover ground at a time. And so then I'll go into what gear to bring. And this kind of depends on how you're planning to get off. But the basics of what we brought are a half rack of BD cams, so one of each most common sizes. And so this is a cam, you place it into cracks to catch you if you fall. They're actually quite strong. I think people who don't climb, it looks kind of sketchy, but if you go into the physics and how they're rated, they're pretty good. Jordan really liked totem cams. I'd never climbed with totem cams, but we also did a half rack of them. We did a set of nuts, and then to Jim Nelson's advice, bringing a lot of slings. Forbidden has a lot of horns that let you just place a piece of nylon around it and clip that, and they're really strong. I also recommend having a lot of slings because you'll experience a lot of rope drag if you don't extend things a lot. And so having the ability to, after you place a piece, extend how long it reaches for the rope, so that way it's more of a straight line, will make the climbing a lot more enjoyable. Then the basics, which I won't go into too much unless anyone asks questions. For water, I recommend 2 liters, but maybe you could even get away with 1 liter. As you're going up Boston Basin, there's quite a bit of streams, so it's easy to fill up water when you're going up to the route, and then when you're coming back down, it's easy to fill up again. I drink a lot of water, and I felt like 2 liters was pretty okay. For early season, you'll also definitely need ice axe and crampons when the glacier's a bit bigger. We did it in August, and we brought them just because the latest trip report needed it. And I'll answer what lots of slings mean in a second. For early season, you definitely want ice axe and crampons. We brought them, but actually ended up not needing them. In August, enough snow had melted that we were able to get to the base of the route without needing any gear to protect us on steep snow. By a lot of slings, I probably would, I don't remember our exact number, but I believe we were something around 12 single slings. So, and then I think 4 to 6 double slings, and you could even do more than that. And a lot of them you could bring just 1 carabiner. If you're gonna be putting them around horns and such, you don't need 2 carabiners. Then for the route, we opted to bring a 60-meter rope, even though we were planning on doing the North Ridge descent. We did that because we wanted to be safe in case things went off. We also hadn't done the North Ridge descent. So a 60-meter rope when you're rappelling down gives a lot more length and options. On Forbidden, if you plan on rappelling at all, plan on bringing a lot of nylon tat that you can leave behind. A lot of the stations were kind of rotting, and while we were able to use some of the tat there, you definitely want to go follow it all the way back. Some of the ones that people had obviously been clipping were rotted in the back, and so would not hold a person. So if you plan on rappelling, bring enough gear so that way if you needed to rappel it all without tat already being there, that you could protect yourself. If you know Forbidden well, and I would say, and you're feeling up for it, according to Jim Nelson and from other things I've read, if you do the North Ridge descent, you can simul up the East Ridge, then simul down the North Ridge until it meets with the East Ledges, and then go across from there. And if you do that, you'll never need to rappel, and so a 40-meter rope should be enough. So now I'll start with how our trip went. Oh, and Jim Nelson just commented, 30 meters should be okay too. And again, thanks Jim for all the beta that you gave me and Jordan. It was incredibly helpful. So since we were doing this in a day, me and Jordan had been planning to do this route for maybe about 2 years beforehand, but we had a crazy list of the weekends we had selected, just kept on getting bad weather. And so finally, there's this Friday we had planned, and we went for it. And it had about a 1% chance of rain, if I remember correctly. Jordan can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. But so we drive up to Cascade Pass after eating Mondo's, and then we set our alarms for about 3:30 a.m. And after shoving food and coffee into ourselves, we drive the car down, park, and then start the hike into Boston Basin. So this is a blurry photo that Jordan took of me. About 5 minutes into the trail, it takes a sharp turn down to the left, and it was dark, and we missed that, and we saw kind of a thing that looked like this, which now doesn't look like a trail, and maybe it wasn't this, but it was similar to this, and it looked like people had gone there, so we decided to follow it. And very quickly it turned out that it was not the trail. I would say we both are mildly competent with GPSs. And when you're about a fourth of a mile off the trail, but stuck in bushes, GPSs aren't that accurate. And oh, Jordan says he knew we were lost by the time we took the first picture, which is probably true. But we all thought that we were quite close to the trail, and we kept on going down and trying to rejoin it. So these trees are called slide alder, and why, I actually don't know why they have the nickname, but I imagine it's because when you're going down it, this is actually a pretty steep incline going down, and it almost feels like you're levitating as you go down these trees. They're actually like holding you up above the ground, and I definitely slipped and fell on my ass a few times. And so after about 45 minutes, we finally do make it back to the trail. We were about probably another 5 minutes down the trail from the trailhead. So my first tip to anyone who wants to do this is 5 minutes into the trail, don't get off route. But this is around 6:15 a.m. So 2 hours later, we finally broke out of the trees, and Jordan's pointing at Boston Basin, which is right here. So this is Boston Basin. You can see a lot of streams coming down. This is Forbidden here. This is the gully going up to the West Ridge. The East Ridge starts right here, and then you climb along the skyline. If you come out over here to the right, you would see Boston Peak and then Sahalee Peak. And Sahalee is another pretty common glacier climb that people do on the Kian-Save Glacier. And then behind this is called Johannesburg. Oh, Steve Smith says, slide alder is so named due to it forming densely in slide paths, so avalanche paths. Oh, I did not know that, but that's good to know. So behind Forbidden, so if you turned around 180 degrees, this is called Johannesburg, which is another mountain I want to do at some point. Supposedly, you can put on your harness and then hike 30 minutes and start climbing up this 5,000 foot face. It's rarely done, but would be quite a journey. I believe this is the most common route, but there's a few coming up other areas. And then the descent is down the back and you hike around to get back to Cascade Pass. But I just want to reiterate how many environments are in Boston Basin. You know, you get above tree line and then there's glaciers above you and there's this nice tundra area. But when you go straight down there, it's so densely forested and moist that there's a lot of growth. I like to call Johannesburg Big J just because the whole time you're hiking, it dominates your skyline view behind you. This was, I think, one of the prettier photos of the climb. So now we're kind of nearing the top of the Boston Basin tundra area. Forbidden's right here. Again, you can kind of see the ridgeline of the East Ridge. It's very iconic, I'd say, just because there are all these gendarmes. So you go over them and then you down climb. And then this one right here, which is right before the crux, you climb over and then you do one rappel. And we ended up not doing that just because I didn't realize that I was getting past it and I accidentally went around it, but it was still a fun route. And so here we are hiking up. There was one thing I wanted to point out. On this photo, you can see the first camp of Boston Basin. So if you have permits, there's a compostable toilet, I believe, down there. Supposedly there's a hidden ranger toilet hidden somewhere else too. That's at a secret camp that I could never find. But you can see the tents here. These were probably people going to go do Sahali. So here we are. Forbidden's now up to the right. This is a mountain called Mount Torment. They have quite exciting names in this area. And so to get up to Forbidden, we kind of get on these rocks and then we go up the path here, and we'll have better photos in a second. There's also a high camp for Forbidden that I believe also has a toilet. There were some people camping there when we went by. If you were to camp to do Forbidden, I would either do here, or I'll also point out another bivvy spot for the East Ridge that would be at the direct base of the route. So now we've started going up the rocky part at the bottom. You can kind of see it is getting a little bit steep, but it's pretty ledgy and you can figure out a path through it. Again, here's Johannesburg, and we're getting above some clouds, and I don't know, just a really beautiful area. All right, so this kind of gives you a view of the way up to the East Ridge. This is taken at the same time. This is around 7:30 a.m. So about an hour after we popped into Boston, out of the trees in Boston Basin. What you do is you basically just follow up this gully and then you go to the right of here. I believe that it looked like there was another way you could go over here, but to the right worked pretty well. We did walk on snow a little bit, but it wasn't too steep. And so we actually never needed to use our crampons and ice axe. And so if you're doing Forbidden in the late season, I would recommend the East Ridge Direct or the East Ridge routes. I don't know much about the face route, so I'd also look into those. But at this time, the West Ridge, most people weren't doing because, I think we have a photo of it, but the Cat Scratch Gully had a moat, so the snow you have to ascend to get into the gully had a big break, and it looked pretty dangerous. Martin just asked if there's cairns. I actually don't remember there being cairns. Jordan can chime in if he wants. I think down in Boston Basin, there were a few cairns when trails split off. But up here, a lot of this will be snow covered in the winter, and any cairn that gets placed will just be blown off. And then once you're right above this, you can basically see where the start of the route is. And there was a path that obviously people had walked, but it was really choppy. And so I don't feel like this was maybe a spot where you'd get lost for lack of cairns. Okay, so this is a look at the West Ridge. And so here's the summit, there's the start of the East Ridge. And the West Ridge you get into by going up this gully. And then you get up here and then you start ascending. And you can kind of see right here, there's a break in the snow. And so this is much easier to get into in the early season. So maybe around May to June. And maybe, I think people were even doing it in July. But by the time we were there were only bad trip reports of either people failing or kind of horror story type situations, and not recommending this approach for Forbidden. This is also why we were originally hoping to do a full traverse and get to the summit and then down climb the West Ridge. But with current conditions and after talking to Jim and hearing from others, we decided that we'd do a different descent. I see a few questions. Okay. Cat Scratch is to the left of the snow gully to access the West Ridge. Okay, is it, if you're gonna do the West Ridge, I'd look up how to get to Cat Scratch Gully. I don't know the specifics of it. I also got a question that the sky looks pretty gray. So as we were going, you can see it looks kind of nice now, but then you can see some clouds coming. Again, we had 1% chance of rain, so we were in a very optimistic mood. Also because we had so many cancellations, we still wanted to go ahead with it. And so we were kind of aiming like, unless it started raining hard, we'll keep going because we're already almost 5,000 feet up at this point, and so far there were no signs of rain, but it was getting more and more overcast. And then here, okay, yeah, this is the one that we were just looking at. You can see more overcast is coming in. I thought it was pretty, yeah, clouds were forecasted, no rain, so as expected, Jordan says. So here we are, this is kind of a jump. We didn't take photos in this area, probably because we did need to use our hands to scramble over rocks and up little, maybe 4-foot chimneys. Like it just took a little climbing move, but wasn't hard. And so this next photo is taken right up here. And so this is the start of the East Ridge right here. And so to the right would be that first gendarme, this one right here. And if you were to also bivvy, a good spot is there are a few bivvy spots up here. And so you could bring up camping gear, camp here, do the East Ridge, and then leave all your camping gear here. The negative of probably bivvying up here is there's no water sources unless there's still snow. And so I would probably not camp here. Also, it feels, I'm going to talk through times some more. This is 8:30 a.m. But once you're here, the climbing of the route and getting back is probably just, I think it was about 6 hours for us to do the route and come back. I think we would have been a lot faster if conditions were better, which I'll get into as I do more pictures. So again, for our optimism, you can see sunlight here. There's patches in the clouds. Everything looks good. And then this is at 9:50. So that I think is the first hump of the East Ridge. And so we're in our first simul block. So when simul climbing, you still have to stop at certain points when the first person runs out of gear. And as the first person is placing it, the second person is climbing and collecting it. and then you just have the next person lead. And so I remember there was like a light sprinkle, like almost the wind just blowing rain droplets, but it wasn't bad. And so when I shouted this, Jordan said, "It looks good," and I kept coming. And yeah. So here's me. This, I think, gives good views of what a lot of the East Ridge is it's very exposed, but not too hard of climbing for the bulk of it. And a lot of the rock is very solid. So you can see there is a cam in here, but if we go back, you can also see that there's a lot of protruding rocks that you could just put a piece of nylon around and use that as protection. Also, as you're climbing, a good way to protect is to weave the rope on either side. So if I fell off this side and the rope went around a boulder, it would catch us there. But again, we're only simul climbing on this terrain because we know we aren't going to fall, but we wanted the safety measure of having a rope involved. So here's us continuing on the East Ridge. This is actually at the end of my simul block. So this is me coming up. You can see I have a lot of the gear and slings around me. You can see also I've done a coil of rope to make it so that we only had, I think we had 20 to 30 meters of rope out between us. So that way there's not too much rope at any point. And this, I think, gives a good perspective of the exposure. And so this is Boss Basin on the right, and these are the glaciers on the north side of Forbidden, which I think creates a really drastic look in these photos. But so a lot of the route is climbing up and under these things, I mean, up and over, and then you kind of come down. And you can see there's almost a little path, and here's the rope. And so you can see it winds. And this is where having long slings is really helpful, because you will start getting a lot of rope drag if you can't keep the rope straight. For this photo, for people who want to know the mountains, that's Booker, Buckner, and so there's Storm King back here. So Mount Goody would be a little bit behind Storm King. And Goody is the tallest non-volcanic peak in the North Cascades, I believe. But yeah, so really pretty. I also like the name Storm King, just cool mountain names. So then this is some photos blotched together. That's why there's kind of a weird lighting pattern right here. But this is the North Ridge. So you can kind of see how it joins. The photo that was taken earlier of the people bivvying on the North Ridge was probably quite a ways down here. Most people who do the North Ridge, I believe, take 2 to 3 days. And like one day is merely just getting to it, and then another day to climb it, and then one to get out, or if you're a faster party, probably 2 days. And so the nice thing about climbing on Forbidden is where the North Ridge starts meeting the East Ridge. You know, you're at the top, there's no false summit, they both go to the summit. And here's me going up another part of the route. This makes it look pretty steep, and I think the photo makes it look steeper than it was, but there were a good amount of maybe mid-5th class moves here and there. So it's not like the ridge is only 4th class. There's still a good amount of climbing in there. And so once you kind of make it up, it will get easier again as you go up and over a hump or a gendarme in the ridge. And then here's Jordan. This is the crux of the route, which means it's the hardest part. It's a 5/8 move. Getting right here, I believe, Jordan might be able to chime in. I don't remember being that hard. And then there was kind of in this area one move that you could place a cam above you, so it was a pretty safe fall. But it kind of just took, I think it was one hand jam, and you could just pull yourself over. And so it was about like maybe 10 to 15 feet of 5/8 climbing. But so for this part, we actually stopped simul climbing and uncoiled the ropes around us. You can see Jordan doesn't have it around him. And I'm here belaying him, taking a photo, which is really great belaymanship. But So it also helped out just because then he can do a full 60-meter pitch to get over all this hard part of climbing. I do believe looking at around and reading that you could climb around this, but I think if you are, if you don't want to do this, I would just do the East Ridge. Oh, Jordan says my extra rope was in the backpack anyways. But I would plan on doing this if you want to do the East Ridge. It's quite fun. And so then here's me following up the East Ridge. Again, Buckner in the back with Storm King. You can see it's getting a little bit more cloudy. And as we were climbing, there were little bits of rain and the wind would blow it on this side, but on this side it would be dry. And you can actually see there's some snowflakes coming down. And so yeah, it was chilly, but we were doing pretty well. You can see I'm a little bit wet on the feet, and some snowflakes were going down. So we were definitely in kind of the mood that we wanted to go fast. All right, and then just because there's this horn, we wanted to joke around that it looked hard. And I think one of the things to make sure in the Alpine is you're in this weird environment. You're high up, exposed. Make sure you're with like great company and you can stop and still have a great time and laugh. Because if you're climbing in these environments, you definitely want to be able to enjoy the aspects of it. So after the crux, I was able to do, you can see the North Ridge here, but this is the peak of Forbidden. And so with the Simuling, we ended up not needing to because I was able to, I forget actually. I think I was able to make it to the summit, I forget. But you can see I start running it out. And so this is a sling for those who are unfamiliar. You can see that the piece of protection is somewhere back here, but it's clipped down here. So it lets the rope stay straight. And the rope will end up doing a lot of friction. So you want to keep it straight, and the friction itself from just rubbing on the rock will be quite a bit, let alone if it has kinks or corners to deal that it has to go around. And so here we're going to the top. If I remember correctly, I say final crux. It wasn't really a crux, but in the Becky Bible, it talks about it being the final crux. It's just like a 5-5 move. But you go up and over that. And the nice thing that I really liked about this ridge is all this granite is extremely solid rock. There wasn't much loose rock on it. And we were, I think that adds a lot to the fun when you're not needing to worry about loose rock falling or slipping on it. So again, I really like this photo. This is that big gendarme you saw at the beginning. So our pack, well, we're wearing our packs, but we left some extra water and other things right here before we got on the route. But it gives a good perspective of here's the whole East Ridge with the different humps. There's Jordan right there. And the things that always amaze me is like you'll be up at this environment and then there's still grass growing and bugs, and if you slept up here I'm sure a rodent would come and eat your food. And some people might think I'm joking, but people who camp high up in the Alpine like this on rock routes will have they call them snaffle hounds, will eat like shoes or whatever have salt on it, just because there's no salt up here. Jordan privately messaged me hoping that I'd have a shot of my foot because I had a really gnarly blister here. This is me on the summit, very eagerly about to take off my shoes, but I did not include the blister shot. But so we're up here, it's just a fantastic view. Something I want to just call out is, so the lakes up here just get this really kind of almost cyan blue color, and it's called from glacial flour, which is as the glaciers come down, they erode the rocks underneath. So kind of like a flour for cooking, and the minerals in the rock when like that will create this cyan blue. And again, you can see like here's a bunch of slings that we were using. Also, we brought our shoes up because for the descent, we wanted out of those, and that's what I was very eager for. And even on the summit, it's a pretty nice little area, maybe like 10 square feet, but I'd still stay roped up, and we did a good job of that. Then we tried to take, or Jordan tried to take summit selfies, and I was not a good participant, but we got a good one on the left. But the summit is truly breathtaking, I felt. And so we were up there for a little bit, enjoying the view. This is at 11:48, we summited. So that would be about 3 hours after starting on the route. And Jordan wants to call out, there's a free 0.4 cam on the summit. There were quite a few stuck cams up there for some reason. And I see another question, did we wear rock shoes for the whole entire ridge? And yeah, we did. These TC Pros I wear are a little bit bigger, and you can see, or I wasn't wearing socks, but most of the time I'm able to wear socks in the shoe size I wear. Yeah, I get, if it was dry, like we did have some wet rock because of the wind and the sprinkling on the southern side of the rock, but the northern side would be dry. I think you could definitely do it in approach shoes for most of the route, but I like using rock shoes while simuling in this type of terrain. And so then it started actually sprinkling. Like before it would kind of sprinkle, but before one of us could bring it up, it would stop, so we weren't paying attention to it. We also were already on the route, so we kind of knew the easiest way would just be to get to the top where there's a bunch of pre-made rappel stations to go down. So right off the summit block is the first wrap station to go down the northeast face. And Jordan wanted to call out, there's no longer the 0.4 cam because he took it. But so you basically just start rappelling straight down. It's 5 rappels if I remember correctly. And then this is after the first rappel, and you can see compared to earlier, so I'll go back. This is what we had earlier, started sprinkling on the top. Now clouds have really started moving in, and we could see like nice blue skies over here, and then you could see this, and we hoped that we would get this and not this, but the winds were blowing to the right. And here's another great view of the North Ridge. Nice little selfie shot. You can see water on these pitons. So there's a lot of old pitons as you're coming down. And as you're rappelling, definitely put knots in the end of your ropes. I'm at the next rappel station, and you kind of have to rappel towards the end of the rope, and there were rope stretcher rappels, which mean that you're getting very close to the end of the rope, so you want to tie knots to make sure you don't fall off. And you kind of have to get to the end, and then you'd start hopping around left and right trying to find the next rappel station. And so I like to imagine like Becky or some old person from the 1960s or so put this here. So here's the North Ridge. So you can kind of see the northeast face here. I would call it maybe 4th class terrain. There is like a trip report out there of some trail runner who ran up Boston Basin and then just went up this face and met a bunch of climbers at the summit, but he was in trail running shoes. I probably wouldn't do that. It doesn't seem like the most fun, but you could. But talking about the descent from the North Ridge, me and Jordan guessed that the sandy ledge was probably here, and then this was the way to get onto the east ledges. But I also saw this. Jim's just commented. Jim, is it this first one right here, or is it the second one that's the ramp coming down from the North Ridge? And he'll comment in a second, hopefully. But we couldn't tell if it was this one or this one coming down. And then it really started raining. Okay, the first higher one. So this is the ramp. So if you want to use a 30-meter rope or 40-meter rope and not do any rappels, you can just simul down the north ridge, and right here you can take this ramp and it will join back over here. Again, we were hoping to do this, but we opted not to just because it was raining pretty continuously at this point. But then it really started raining, and you can see the rocks wet. And normally this is kind of third or fourth class, but it's very exposed and a fall would not be good. So a lot of parties in good weather will opt to go across and be unroped, which lets you move a lot faster. But I wasn't feeling comfortable, so we put a rope on, and there were trip reports saying there's no good rock on the northeast face, so you couldn't simul it or put any protection. I felt like you can see it's kind of run out between protection, but there was enough good ones that I felt actually pretty comfortable simuling it, and it was a very welcome feeling that to have the rope on you when you're dealing with all this slick rock. On the east ledges, the descents, you can kind of see things like this. There's these ribs of rock that come down. So it'll be kind of this path, like small little path where you're coming across and walking, and then there will be this rock rib that you kind of have to do a little climbing move over to get back to the little path. The beta for this is don't climb up, stay low, and if you think that you're not staying low enough, you probably aren't. Keep climbing down. And so yeah, as you're going, you're actually going to be losing some elevation when you're traversing the east ledges. Let me get a glass of water. Yeah, oh, and Jordan calls out, we had already done the sketchiest part of the traverse by the time we decided to rope up. But I'm so glad we did. I felt a lot better. And Steve commented that the look and feel of the east ledges, if you read trip reports, some people see them as horror scenarios, and then other people see them as not too bad. I think if it was nice weather, I would say not too bad. And I think if I were to do Forbidden and Descend, I would do the east ledges again. They're descending via the west ridge, or some parties even down climb the east ridge itself. Might be a little bit more secure in certain ways, but it definitely would be slower. And I do like the fact that after the rappels, you could take off the ropes and quickly get past this. So up to the right is the east ridge. You can see one of the gendarmes in the distance, and then this would be one of the rock ribs that we probably had to go around. There's me probably building a little station. Jordan's waiting for me to finish up. But another aspect I like, and you can see below, a fall would be deadly here. And I believe there have been some accidents. So if you do the east ledges, just make sure that you're willing to speak up and put a rope on with your partner if you feel uncomfortable. But I felt like if it was dry, the ledges were actually pretty sturdy. But one of the aspects I love is just right below you this whole time, there's these crevassed glaciers. And even though you hiked and didn't have to go across glaciers to get to where you are, it makes it feel like you're in a truly alpine environment. So this is a flip of the other shot. This is at 2:30, so it's taken us about 2 hours to traverse here. And a lot of that is because it started raining on us, so we were moving slower. And then also we opted to put the rope on, so that took, we had to take everything out of the packs, put everything back on, and then traverse over. And so you can see on the east ledges, there are quite a bit of, I wouldn't call them loose, like they weren't actively falling, but you could kick rocks down. But in kind of the bigger rocks and stuff, there were still spots to place protection. And here's Jordan, probably pretty sullen with how wet we've gotten at this point. Again, here's a nice view of probably of the east ledges, like with some of this, like the rain actually started dissipating as we started traversing the east ledges. So we were just very unlucky with the one bit of rain we did get. That was hard. But you can see that there's actually pretty flat paths to walk across over here. And the North Ridge, I think, is a really pretty ridge to do as well. Again, this would be the ramp right here if you simuled down on the North Ridge. And as Jim told me, which is why we wanted to do it a lot, is some of the best rock of the North Ridge is up here. And so rather than doing that 2 or 3 day hike or a 2 or 3 day climb to do it, you can experience a lot of the North Ridge in this 1 day climb of the East Ridge. Just more pretty pictures of the glacier. This would be Buckner. That would be Boston Peak. So over this ridge would be Boston Basin. Right around here, I believe, someone will probably correct me. I believe around here is if you want to do the North Ridge, you pop up over here and climb around. And then there would also be a peak somewhere in here called Shark Fin Tower. But I think just really pretty glaciers and stunning views. So this is kind of a jump, probably because once we got to the gully and got up to our packs, we kind of just wanted to get down quite a bit. So this was around 2:30, and then this is about an hour later at 3:30. We're hiking down the path. We've descended most of the technical rock underneath the East Ridge. I guess I say technical, but it was mostly 3rd or 4th class. And this is nearing the bottom. What type of camera did we bring? This was all cell phone pictures, believe it or not. I think I had an iPhone and Jordan has a Pixel. Then one of my favorite creatures is the marmot, and Boston Basin has quite a bit of barking marmots. Here's one that was not too thrilled to see us. And here's Jordan, so the high camp for Forbidden would be here. Coming down at this point, this is almost 4:50 p.m. So we've been going at it for about 12 hours at this point, up to maybe 13. And you can see that the Boston Basin actually is a pretty good climber's trail. So this isn't a maintained trail. This is purely from climbers who climb Forbidden hiking up. I added this photo because there's actually a marmot in it, right in the center. And it just shocked me how well they blend in. We'd be walking around and suddenly there would be one right below us. And this one actually stuck around and kind of waddled away as soon as we got pretty close to it. So that I'll wrap up the presentation here. After this point, we just were rushing to get back to the car as quickly as we can. It was about 14.5 hours to 15 hours car to car, 24 hours Mondo to Mondo. Overall, I do recommend the East Ledges descent. I thought that it was fast, and I like the aspect that you don't need to down climb a ridge and then get back to your, most importantly, get back to where your gear is so you can stash some. Most of the route is lower 5th class, but make sure that you have experience with route finding. And I'd just be comfortable with the grade above the crux, just so that you can go a little bit faster, and make sure that if you get off route, you don't get into anything over your head. And that's it for what I had to present. If anyone has any questions, I'll be here for a little bit longer and happy to answer them. Oh, I got a question. Did I carry a watermelon to the summit? And no, I did not. But on a climb of Forbidden Peak, which is in the same area and similar elevation gain, I brought, it's like a 12 to 14 pound watermelon, and then we carved it on the summit. And I hid it from everyone the whole time. It was in the base of the pack. Is there anything I would do differently? Jordan could answer that too. I don't know if he has anything. I think we did pretty well. I guess what I would have done differently with the east ledges is when we got to the bottom and it was raining. I mean, when we ended our rappels, I would have made sure that we kept the rope on and just done it from the beginning because it added probably about an hour that we coiled and packed the rope, and then we had to uncoil and reset up the rope. There's a question, could you do the North Ridge going up the east ledges and then to the North Ridge? You could, but you're not really doing the whole North Ridge. If you look at the topo, which I guess I can jump to it, it's really not much of the North Ridge. The North Ridge itself is, okay. Okay, so here's Forbidden Peak. The North Ridge that you descend would just be to here. And so you'd maybe descend to here, but there's still this whole part of the North Ridge. So I think people who truly do the North Ridge, the nice thing is you get to enjoy this really long ridge. And Jim Nelson said that that's the least technical route to the summit if you did the East Ledges and then North Ridge. Well, awesome. If there's not any more questions, I'll let you all go, and thank you very much for calling in. Yeah, if anyone. Ooh, Jared, that's a hard question. What did I order at Mondo's? I believe I did burgers each time, but I actually don't remember. I usually do their burgers. I think I did one with an egg, and then I forget the other one. Alb asks, is this possible in winter? It has been done in the winter, and I think that would require a completely different set of skills, though, if you want to do it in the winter. You just have to be prepared for a lot harsher conditions, and you probably definitely, I guess another thing to note is usually you can't even make it to the trailhead in the winter in your car. So you'd have to hike or ski probably maybe 6 miles to the trailhead. Oh yeah, I remember that, Mark. I don't know if you do, Jim, or if Jim's still on, but my graduation for intermediate on Sahali, I brought champagne, but then at the end, we bumped into Jim and his climbing partner, and you were going to do one of the face routes on Forbidden. Awesome. Thanks, Steve, and everyone. Yeah, I probably wouldn't go up forbidden without ropes. I'd be curious to hear what they did for getting down, because the goalie going up to the Westridge, I believe you need to, or I guess you don't have to, but people usually rappel down it.